Yeah, as I was saying earlier, I've had probably three distinct careers. I think the first part of my career was in the more traditional telecom operator space back before we invented digital wireless or the mobile internet. And then the next phase of my career, I spent about 20 plus years in Silicon Valley as a software CEO, and got to know the valley and got to see the rise of the dot-com era and the downturn, and actually even lived through the mortgage meltdown. So got that roller coaster. And then most recently, I've spent my time working at the intersection of government and technology with the private sector. And how do we get private technologists more engaged with government to help push forward some of these technology challenges that we have?
So, and that's where I met you when I was in the Pentagon, and you were working in the White House, and you were a prestigious Presidential Innovation Fellow. So, can you tell us what a Presidential Innovation Fellow is, and how you ended up, going from I don't know, you were on your couch to the White House? That's a good story.
As an Obama baby, as I'm sometimes referred to as well. But I'm one of the few presidential fellows who worked across both administrations, so I do have that distinction. But yeah, during my, I was literally sitting on the couch in Silicon Valley, and had just got done on a project with Boeing, and we exited a company, and was watching the news, and I see President signs the executive order creating Presidential Innovation Fellows, and I was sitting there drinking a scotch and had my iPad next to me. I said, well, that sounds kind of cool, and I just sent a cold call email to the White House. Then they called me back, and then when they called me back, at first I thought it was a joke, and I didn't call them back. And then the second time they called, they said, well, maybe it really is the White House, so I answered. And that's how I wound up, spending a couple of years in Washington, D.C., going back and forth between D.C. and Silicon Valley, and getting plugged into government and trying to bring commercial technologists into Department of Defense in particular. So
what was I think the biggest shock that you had coming into government? And what was it? I mean, how is it different than working in the private sector?
Well, I could state the obvious, the paperwork and the slowness in decision making, but I think probably the real shock for me was the hours that people really work more normalized, 8 to 5 lives, if you will, as opposed to maybe what I was more accustomed to, which is the hair on fire, got to beat the next closest tech company who's breathing down your neck, because your venture capitalists are sitting on top of you, type of environment of the valley. So they're very, very different environments, both of them with their pros and cons, though.
So your goal or your task was to bring some Silicon Valley expertise to government. How did that go? And was it easy to recruit people to come and do that?
Well, how did it go? What I found is that you could come up with some really cool ideas. And, we worked on a project called Cloud.gov and really trying to look at how do you bridge small business companies into government so that government could actually purchase their products and services. And so we built a Cloud.gov portal, and you could go out and buy all these different apps and services that the commercial world has to offer. But then when we got to the next phase, which is, okay, now we got to go market it and tell everybody inside of government that we built this project, then it came down to, well, you actually can't spend any money to do that. So that was like a learning experience.
Wait, what? You can't spend money?
No, we could not spend marketing dollars to go out and promote and make government aware that we had gone and built this portal that they had asked us to bridge small business into government and to allow government to more rapidly acquire, or procure, small business products and services. And so that was a learning experience. And then after that, then I focused, obviously, you and I, where we crossed paths, trying to figure out with the National Security Council, how designees, how do we bring private industry technologists into the defense side? And I think we've done a real good job of deploying Presidential Innovation Fellows across the federal government. The story is, Presidential Fellows started because of the healthcare website that had gone down, and and how the White House had reached out to Silicon Valley to help, and it just kind of snowballed from there. But we hadn't yet crossed the river, if you will, and said, okay, let's go work with the Pentagon, and let's go see if we can figure out how to bring technologists into the Pentagon to also help DoD with technology challenges and bringing, COTS products or commercial services into DoD. So,
and that's where you and I met, and that is where consequently the infamous DIUX paper comes from. That bringing Silicon Valley into the Defense Department. So, do you remember the story? Can you tell the story of how all that came together, and it ultimately led to the current leadership in DIU?
Yeah, well, we were, I think, you and I were looking at trying to figure out how to do something with the new office that you were standing up in China, or looking at China inside of DoD, and there was an opportunity to educate people on who the largest investor in Silicon Valley is. And most people, believe historically, they're always surprised and think, well, it's Intel, right? Which historically hasn't been true, but it's actually, China. It's the largest
spoiler alert,
capitalist.
Chinese Communist Party.
The Chinese Communist Party has access to U.S. technology and know-how in Silicon Valley faster than our own government does. And so we looked to collaborate on that paper, and at the same time, Mike Brown from Symantec was moving on from his position, and he's another one that I had just picked up the phone and reached out to and said, hey, want to get back, and something kind of interesting over here. And we mixed a good glass of Kool-Aid, and you and I both did, and we were able to pull Mike in and get him to write that paper and work on it with some colleagues, and really run around and start educating the Hill on what who is the real largest investor in Silicon Valley. And then today he's since gone on to turn that into he loves GovTech so much that he decided to stay in the
and he's running
DoD's version of venture capital, right? And so he's still in it today, and I guess we can say that's our claim to fame, is that we're both out, but we talked him.
He's still in. Well, I mean, I think the big so what of that people don't realize is, from that small beginnings, from you picking up the phone and, calling the White House to where we're at today, that was the beginning. That DIUX report that Mike wrote, that we collectively, you and I worked together to bring Mike into government. That DIUX report is the genesis, essentially, of what we would eventually get in government called the Section 301 report. The Section 301 investigation that the U.S. Trade Representative did, that all tariffs on China are basically come from. So it started with that DIUX report that we worked on. So, part of the goal of that was to show that, this progression of, from a very humble, start, from your picking up the phone and calling the White House and coming on board. And we met, and I'm trying to figure out China, and you have the experience and the connections to allow that to happen. Really, eventually led to, probably one of the most consequential reversals in trade policy in U.S. history, and that's just one of the many things that I think we've been around. But probably the most important thing that I see today, and that you're currently working on as co-CEO of Q Networks, is the 5G network. So, what is 5G? And what in your mind is something that probably everybody thinks they know, but they have wrong?
Yeah, what is 5G? I mean, gosh, you don't you see it when you turn on your phone? It says 5G. Or you watch the TV commercials coming to a town near you, right? There's so much noise out there, and hand waving and misrepresentation on 5G and where it is, but ultimately, all that being aside, from a pure technology perspective, I look at 5G as being probably one of the biggest innovations since the invention of the internet. And I say that just simplistically because it's where wireline connectivity and wireless connectivity start to collide, and we start to have ubiquity between, speeds and access, and is one, major aspect of 5G. But it's also, will enable a new generation of services as well, and the explosion of the industrial internet. And we talk a lot today, everyone wants to associate wireless with being about voice and I can game faster or video. And the reality is that's the real value of 5G is enabling the industrial internet. It's really how do we, to me, it's the foundation for how it is we're going to move forward in the reindustrialization of this country. Is, if we can roll out 5G and we can do it, in a constructive way, we can create a next generation of manufacturing jobs and get back to where we used to be, which would be technical thought leaders in telecommunications. And we've lost that, is the reality, and that's something Americans don't want to believe. But the data all speaks the truth. But 5G, to me, is a major underpinning on our future economic viability as a nation. I think we keep thinking of it in terms of, well, I'm going to watch faster movies, and who gives a damn? We gotta, if we don't get back to reindustrializing the nation and using this the industrial internet to be the underpinning of that, we got bigger problems.
So there's this big thing going on now in government called TikTok. And of course, you and I have talked about TikTok quite a bit.
It's banned in my house.
Right, it's banned in your house. But, I think one of the things that people don't understand is that the problem with TikTok is really about the problem of what you can do today with people's data. So you can literally understand the personality, the interactions, the relationships, nearly just about everything that you want about a person using the data collected by their smartphone. But then when you build that into a smart city, you literally have everything about the person. Now, we typically don't think about the problems that causes, but as you and I have talked about, the ability to influence you to buy a pair of shoes that Amazon leverages with their data empire and algorithms and machine learning and artificial intelligence can also be used to affect your political orientation, your cultural, your social orientation, and really can be used, as we know, to undermine our political system. So, talk us through kind of what the data security problems are in 5G, because I think that's where, people have heard it's a faster smartphone, but okay, who has access to this data that the tech companies are creating?
Yeah, you're right, and that's even a bigger picture description of what 5G does, right? Is that 5G creates let's call it hypothetically 10x the amount of data that we see today, and even at a more granular level. And if you believe, as many do, and I think China's even come out and said this, right? That the data is the gold of or the oil of the next generation. Then you gotta scratch your head and go in the U.S. It's like, well, what the hell are we doing about it, right? And so when you look at things like, for me, when I look at things like TikTok, I'm like, okay, well, why don't we just put a beacon in everybody's hand and let them walk around, and they can collect, other nation states can collect as much information as they want on individual U.S. citizens or their surroundings as they need. And TikTok, I think, is just the poster child for where an explosive app or service can really enable that type of potential, government state-sponsored, access to U.S. citizens, which is, really unheard of, because we don't, as American citizens, we don't really think about data and the importance, of data. But I think specific to your question, when you think about 5G, then you go, okay, well, 5G. We've always also had this point of view that well, networks are secure because we trust our North American, wireless operators. If we don't trust them, who do we trust, right? And the reality is that historically, and you go, through all the Gs up through 4G, it's primarily been driven by a lot of U.S. influence, or even directly by the U.S., where we've always been leaders in the telecommunications industry. The last 100 years, the U.S. has led the telecommunications industry. You look at it today and you go into 5G, we don't even have a telecommunications manufacturer left in this country. So we're not leading anything. So all we're doing is buying other people's products and services and putting it into our networks and then telling U.S. citizens, trust, it's okay. Don't worry, I bought it in China, but you can trust it. So, I mean, I think it's, and that in and of itself exposes a lot of data risk. You get into all the issues, whether it's, man in the middle and how people are snooping on you, or you get into, who owns your data, right? Or, do you trust your data being, unencrypted? Or it raises a lot of questions. And I think there's a lot of data privacy issues that come with 5G, which we're just not even really talking about because we don't understand that it's really about data. And, let's win the battle for the oil of the next generation. And let's let that drive our economic policy decisions and then also drive what we should be doing from a technology level to build out networks.
So one of the things that government has said is that if we just get rid of Huawei in North America, then everything's fine. So is Huawei the only problem? Because, what I understand is that when you bring all of these companies together, I'm an Air Force guy, you're an industry guy, but when you bring Huawei and Ericsson and Samsung and Nokia together, aren't they building basically what's the word I'm looking here for? A common network, a common architecture, at least in terms of the way they look at the technology that underpins 5G?
Yeah, I think you're probably alluding to a bit the standards, right? The interoperability of the standards, and this idea that if we don't buy Huawei, then hey, everything's great, right? We're going to use Ericsson, or we're going to use China, right? Or China, I mean Nokia, who's has a lot of business in subsidiaries in China as well. But the real issue is that then you go look at it and say, okay, well, who designed the global standard? Right? As I said, is that the U.S. designed or in the West, we really influenced the first 4 generations. We sure as hell didn't influence the 5th. I mean, you go look at the number of patents and who owns the most patents in 5G. It's no one in the U.S. You got Qualcomm up there, maybe you got Intel up there, but who else? Right? I mean, 5G, the standard, the global standard is driven by a lot of Chinese companies. And, that's, they've been very aggressive in, their global standards participation with an eye towards how they believe the network should be designed and built out. And I think from a U.S. perspective, had we been a lot more active, and I'm sure I could walk. It'd be blasphemy if I were talking to a carrier, but since I'm the CEO of a private carrier that's looking at this issue, going, no, we got it wrong. I'm going to say it, but the reality is we were asleep at the wheel, and we just assumed that the telecommunications infrastructure providers that we buy product from were taking into consideration, our democratic values around privacy and other things when they're thinking about the management of data and how to securitize that in a world where data is going to completely explode and you're going to have ubiquity between the internet and the wireless internet. And we still this day, we keep talking 5G and it's like, well, I'm on faster Netflix. Right? People, they do not understand the game that we are really playing on a global level with this data war, if you will, and the importance of 5G as the underpinning for that, and how we as a nation, we just can't lose, right? And right now, everyone says, we're building out 5G, and if you believe the TV commercials, hell, it's coming to a city near me, right? So
you brought that up in the beginning. So what is it? What is the state of play with the NEPs, the network equipment providers in North America? Just say for CBRS radios. So CBRS is in the mid band because the AT&T is building 5G, T-Mobile, Verizon. They're all building 5G. So you should be able to easily get a CBRS band radio in North America in 5G, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's a duopoly. I mean, reality is that the ecosystem does what the carriers tell them to do, and so when you have new entrants such as what we're doing at Q, and you're looking at how do you build out a securitized network that enables end users to control their data, to manage the privacy and the use of their own data and information. I pick up the phone and I call any of the different radio access network providers and say, hey, I want to buy CBRS radios, and their response is, well, once we give it to AT&T or Verizon, then you can come back and buy it. And so they don't do anything. They don't build them. It's all bespoke, right? And it's based on.
So if they're not ordering the radios, they're not available.
So, they're not there. So
the truth of the matter is they're not building 5G. I mean, I think that's the point that you're trying to make. Is they're saying they are, yes, but they're really not. Well,
CBS radios are not there for
they're just not available. Right.
Available.
So when you think about Silicon Valley, and everybody thinks of Silicon Valley is synonymous with technology. So you alluded to something that I think is very important, and that is that we've lost the bubble, we've lost the lead on technology. So in reality, Silicon Valley is no longer about technology. It's more about how do you create this next unicorn based on getting to market faster with your idea. But in all reality, the technology is not that exquisite. It's basically some new way or new application or new use of existing technology that you try to rush to market. So there's not a lot of actual invention going on other than in business models. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think the focus is on business model creativity, new algorithm development for harvesting of data, and new creative ways to generate usage data. And I think of that being more at the application layer, if you will. But if you go down into you say, well, who builds the middleware, who builds the next generation infrastructure, if you will. There's not big dollars pouring into that. It's typically viewed as I don't want to do that. I mean, look, you look at the way software is even developed today, and let's just take even at the service or the application layer. You take something like GitHub, and the analogy I like to use, it's like knowing how to frame a house and know why studs are 12 inches on center, and how it is you frame out that wall is very different than standing up the prefab wall, all ready to go and saying, well, now I know how to build a home, right? The guy, the company that knows why the studs are 12 inches on center is a very different company than one that just slaps four walls together. And I think we've lost, and it gets back to almost in many ways to, I look at it as this bleed over where we talk about the loss of manufacturing in this country. I would also argue that we are losing that same mindset has bled over in technology and software development as well, because we've stopped building the underlying pillars or the foundation that enable the services that we want to build, right? And I think that's you go look at carriers today. You go look at the return on capital that they deliver versus a Google or a Facebook or the others. And if you're an investment banker, it's like, well, where are you going to put your money? Are you going to go invest into infrastructure, or are you going to go keep enabling new apps and services and go develop a new algorithm? So we're not aligned there. And I think what I also remind people of, which they forget, is that Silicon Valley was actually started by the defense industry. And, most people in Silicon Valley don't even know that there's government in the defense industry has started Silicon Valley. And right now, if you were to run up and down Sand Hill Road and say, hey, I got a tech startup and it's awesome, and we're going to sell to the Department of Defense and government, they would, you probably wouldn't even get a meeting. So is the sad truth.
That's frightening, because I think the time that you're talking about, we were spending almost 2% of gross domestic product here in the United States on science and technology, space race, the Cold War. We were investing, billions of dollars of government money into basic science research, which we don't do anymore. Apple, took advantage of a lot of those investments that government had made, and companies like Bell Labs that had done research for the United States on behalf of the Department of Defense that basically had this technology sitting around, and a lot of Silicon Valley was built on the back of that. And then what happened was we just stopped investing as a country in that. And then what we've done is we've been living off the fat of that for decades now, and we built something amazing. But the problem is, as we talk about with TikTok, this amazing thing we built actually is best applied in a system that allows you to control people. And I just had we just talked to Rand Waltman in a prior episode, and he's a master of disinformation, and he talks about how the Chinese have used crowdsourcing to do crowd control, which is something that I think we would say we are absolutely horrified by. It's censorship, it's control of your population. But the Chinese Communist Party has adapted the tools and the technologies and the business models of Silicon Valley, and then applied it not only to oppressing their own people, but now they're essentially influencing our own population through applications like TikTok, through businesses like Alibaba, and certainly through the Chinese Communist Party basically putting pressure on U.S. companies to censor their own employees for working.
Yeah, no disagreement. I mean, it's they've done there's a good job of extending that control model via commercial apps and services into other nation states. And it would be like saying, if the U.S. government were to collect all the data from the FANGs here in the U.S. and then use that and harvest that data for understanding all the different nations that those private U.S. companies or those public U.S. companies did business in, and that goes against our values and our principles for democracy. And the reality is not everybody else is playing by the same rules, and we don't recognize that. And our views you mentioned we're living off the fat is one issue, but I also think that we may have our head in the sand a little bit on the fact that democracy as we know it is really under threat. It's some of the underlying pillars of what forms our views of what democracy are changing very dramatically in front of us because of technology, and we haven't yet adapted at a lawmaker level to what that means. Look, I started this story when I was I won't say what company it was, the CEO of a company in the Valley, and we'd have politicians would come through to see what we were doing, and I would have to spend a half day, explaining our technology and what we did, and we did advanced big data analytics. And inevitably, I never got the congressman or, the sitting elected official. You'd always get some 20-something who at least understood how to log in to Facebook or Instagram or use some of those services, so then they could try to interpret what we were doing and then report that up to lawmakers. I think even at a lawmaker level, our understanding of technology and the implications of technology or in how to formulate effective policy to protect our democracy and further our economic agendas is very limited.
Yeah, and so just for the audience out there, FANGs, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google, it's really, from the time the iPhone came into view in 2007, over 10 years, they moved from being nowhere to being now 25% of the Standard & Poor's index. And that means they have huge outsized control over the global information economy. But not only that, they are really the targets that the Chinese Communist Party goes after. So Baidu is essentially Google, Alibaba is essentially Amazon, and Tencent is Facebook. And so their goal is essentially to take Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, and through dominating the 5G platform and being able to be the first to bring those apps and services and business models to market, to then use that to pole vault over the top of the thing. So you just talked about how dangerous it would be if the U.S., basically used the data that the FANGs collect and their ability to mine that data for information and create influential algorithms. But that's exactly what the Chinese are doing. And the bats, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent have those same technologies, except they are controlled by an authoritarian regime that essentially wants to use that data for exactly those things. So, we're on the precipice of a transformational time in not only geopolitics, but also in preserving our republic. So we're close to the 250 years where most republics essentially disintegrate. So the question I think that's so important that you're alluding to is, can we adapt to the world that we created that has basically been weaponized against us? And this is where I think, both you and I have been focused on for the last 3 years, and I think it's going to take another 10 to really determine whether or not the U.S. survives as a democracy. How many democracies actually can make the transition from understanding how to protect their sovereignty and independence in the physical world, or as you say, the energy or the oil of the 21st century being data. Can we manage to transition and protect ourselves in the same way that we protected the United States, in World War I and World War II and the Cold War, but using different tools that really have nothing to do with bombs and bullets. It's can we deal with the fact that, as Kai-Fu Lee says, and Kai-Fu Lee is a leading artificial intelligence thinker in China, they intend and are on the way to becoming the Saudi Arabia of data. What does that mean for us when they can take all of that data, which means theirs and ours, and then put it into algorithms that really allow them to pull the levers behind the scenes in ways that we don't even perceive? It's happening right now in our own, run up to a 2020 campaign. Something that I'm completely, terrified by, because I think that we're not in position to actually defend ourselves.
No, I don't disagree with you. It is the 250-year republic, was an interesting comment, and I sometimes wonder, are we, Rome seems to have a lot of analogy, right? It's just, when I think of it in that way, but we did invent a lot of these tools and services, and if we can get back, and this is where, to me, when we talk about, when I mentioned reindustrialization earlier, to me, it's not just, it's not bringing back manufacturing the way manufacturing used to be. It's also bringing back our ingenuity and our technological innovation on how manufacturing, should look in the future, right? Look at Tesla, and look at Elon Musk, and some of the factories out in that they're factory of the future that they are working on is a model that will still creates jobs and higher skilled jobs, but it's a great example of where the two worlds are kind of coming together. And I think that also has to happen in Silicon Valley as well, is that it's okay to get back to building infrastructure. I look at it as simplistically as having been in the software world when we used to build, a lot of the infrastructures, that you're designing and thinking of the innovation and the infrastructure with an eye towards the services that you want to enable in the future. But if you're not designing and building the infrastructure for what it is you want to enable in the future, you're just sitting back waiting for someone to tell you what it is they did. And that gets back to just sitting back waiting for, whether it's China or someone else to say, hey, tell us what that next wave of infrastructure is going to be like, so I can start thinking about a creative business model and more algorithms. That does not push forward the economic interests of the country as a whole, right? Or the labor market for the country as a whole. And I think technologists have far more influence over, the infrastructure and, contribution to the reindustrialization of the country than they realize. I think we tend to think of it as being, I'm trying to just save a manufacturing plant who's a cabinet maker, in Pennsylvania or something, which, there's a lot of great people who are losing their jobs. But I think it to me, it bleeds over into the technology as well. And I think when we can start to bridge the gap between those two, industries or points of view, if you will, then the U.S. will have a chance. But right now, we're getting our butts handed to us, and we just don't want to admit it because we all feel like our 401ks are doing well and stock market's up. But, go peel back the stock market and say, well, if I go take out the fangs out of the stock market, is the market really way up the way it seems? I think we're drinking Kool-Aid.
Yeah. I just read a book, and I know I talked to you about it. It's called The Kill Chain, written by Christian Bros. And it talks about the fact that these tools that you were working on in Silicon Valley actually never made their way into the Department of Defense. So this ability to do collaboration at the speed of light and apply that on the battlefield, just never made it there. And it's still not there today. In fact, we have these stovepipe communication systems. We have these very archaic ways of working and collaborating on the battlefield that don't represent, modern tools that, business is using today. And so what Christian talks about is how do we bring that into the modern battlefield to make us, better and more efficient in killing. And the reality is that as we've been talking about, it's not about applying force on the battlefield anymore. If you can basically undermine, John Trobaugh's kids and make them think that communism is better than democracy, because essentially that's what the Chinese Communist Party's goal is. It's not to fight with the United States. It's to slowly erode our own, trust and faith in the principles and values that underpin the society. That's it. The idea that, war is politics by other means, or rather politics is war by other means is what the Chinese Communist Party is after. So, this is, in my mind, why I left the military, because I saw that the battlefield had shifted. It had shifted into our communities, into our cities, and into our very homes, and it's something that we need to get after. And I think, what you have been doing and what you have committed your life to do, I think is incredibly valuable in that fight. So, I wore a flight suit. You wear a pullover and flip-flops. I would say that the uniform of the modern warrior is a pullover and flip-flops, and so I want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on. Generally speaking, this has been incredibly enlightening, and I always enjoy talking to you. So thanks, John, for coming on, and we'll have you on again.
Appreciate it, Rob. We'll keep up the good fight, and hopefully we're both looking back 10 years from now going, whew, man, we were right, and we pivoted at the right time.
We made it.
So we made it.
Mexico has 27,000 billions and billions of dollars is pouring into our country, not into other countries. All of this is been so good. It takes a while to catch on, just like it takes a little while. But in addition, we're doing many, many more regulations. We have statutory procedures where 6 months before you do but we have a lot of additional regulations to come, and so important. I actually do believe, I really do believe it's more important than the tax cuts. We invested $2.5 trillion in the U.S. military, including nearly $6 billion to save the historic shipyard, Marinette Marine. You know Marinette? And I was there a few months ago, and I'll tell you, Marinette, they build beautiful. These are beautiful. I call them speedy destroyers. That's what they are. They are look like yachts with batteries. They look like yachts with a lot of weapons on them. If you order them, they got a hell of a lot of weapons on them. Wisconsin will now build the next generation of American warships, creating 1,000 jobs, going up to 2,000, 3,000, and even 4,000 at the shipyard. Thousands of more jobs throughout your state. We killed the leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi. Everybody was after al-Baghdadi. And we then took out the mass murder of American troops and many, many people, many troops from many countries. Soleimani is dead. He died. I withdrew from the last administration's disastrous Iran nuclear deal. $150 billion for nothing. $1.8 billion in cash. That's more impressive. $1.8 billion in cash. We got nothing. Really. And the first call I get, we went dead. And their economy is crashing. The sanctions that we put on. But they cannot have a nuclear weapon. I recognize the true capital of Israel and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. And instead of never-ending wars in the Middle East, we're forging peace in the Middle East. We just signed another country yesterday. You saw that, Sudan. So now we have United Arab Emirates, headed by a great warrior, a great leader, Mohammed, a great leader. And Bahrain, you saw that. And now we have Sudan, and we have many more that are waiting to come in. This was all said by the great geniuses that we dealt with. Giving us our national they've been trying to do it for 40 years. And we have many, many more that are ready to sign up. I did more in 47 months than Joe Biden did in 47 years.
Ruby?
Yeah, so he was. I met that guy. I sat next to him. I didn't buy any wine from him.
Luckily,
but I met him.
Bought some
So
Walmart
initially, I was
bullshit.
like, fuck that guy for like duping all these people. But the thing that they're basically saying was that, yeah, that aside, yeah, he fucked a lot of people up, but his ability to do what he was doing, to put these wines in bottle and mimic what the palate, just the nature, the color, everything about it, and being able to duplicate the what's in the bottle to the point where it would fool a somm. He was like, he's an alchemist. Like, he was really good at like making it. He wasn't just like putting wine in a bottle and selling you the bottle. Like, if you opened it and you tasted
really
it,
thought it
you
was
really
that
thought
wine.
it was that wine. You would go, that seems like not a great version of that wine, but that's that wine.
Oh, so you could tell that it was slightly off.
In some cases, that's
Did you try any of his wine?
No.
No. Oh God, I would love to try it.
But like they were just saying, the guy really was able to get close to mimicking the palates and structures of these wines. So that's why.
What's his name again, Brian? Rudy Kumuyumo. How do you say it?
Ruby Kurnawan. Kurnawan.
Kurniawan. Rudy Kurniawan. Okay.
Read it.
Interesting. So, how did this guy do this? Like, if you
No idea.
if it's such a fine art to create a great wine, and I know I've tried multiple
Well, the thing is,
different wines from you.
what he was doing, and I'm speculating on this. I haven't seen the film, but what he was doing was just to fool you right now. That wine might not last in that bottle once you so it's not gonna hold up. It's not the structure. It's not the structure of wine. I mean, he was literally putting dirt and things in to create that initial impression, so that when you taste it, to investigate it, you go, okay, I think that is, and then you write the check, and he's like, bitch.
There is a fucking great book that I am in the middle of that you would love. That's based on.
But you're gonna read this one next, right?
Yes, I'll read that one. It's my friend Graham Hancock wrote the foreword to it, and then it's Brian Murrow Rescue's book. And here, let me find it. It's in my library here. It's called The Immortality Key, and it is all about ancient wine and the ancient Greeks, how they used they put all kinds of stuff.
Take that note if you don't mind.
Yeah, The Immortality Key. This is the there, Brian's got it there. And it's a really, just listen to the podcast, the recent podcast that I did with this guy. It's amazing. He's a scholar of the Greek classics and Greek history, and he focused on the what did they call it? The Eleusinian Mysteries.
Okay.
Where they would they have these rituals where they would all Eleusis, and they would all get together, and they would have these rituals where they would drink this spiked wine, and the wine was they've proven now the wine was spiked with LSD-like components, was spiked with ergot, and they believe with probably a bunch of other different psychedelics, maybe psilocybin, maybe a bunch of, but it was wines that had these psychedelic compounds, and they would have these incredible rituals, and people would go there, and this is like literally like the foundation of Western civilization came from these rituals, and then these rituals were forbidden by the Roman emperors, and then they started doing these rituals outside of outside of Greece, and they started doing them in Spain, and they found images of them doing it in Italy, and they found residue of these substances in pottery, and they've proven that it traveled all over the place. But what was fascinating to me is that their wine was never just wine. They would put all sorts of different things in the wine, and like wine was in that back then was not just simply grapes that were fermented. They would add cinnamon and honey and all these different things to the wine, which I thought was really fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah, but the fact that it was the source of their psychedelic rituals was wine.
All right, I'm going to read that.
Yeah. Watch the podcast.
Okay.
He's really great at describing it, and it's a very condensed thing. And then to further get into the book.
Did you watch the Fantastic Fungi film?
I haven't seen that yet.
Okay. I started watching. I was about halfway through. I've been kind of busy, Joe. But
you have 50 jobs. I would imagine you're a little, and you have a family. I don't know how the fuck you do it.
Yeah.
It seems.
Well, my wife is a fucking badass. She's more of a badass than I am, and she holds a lot of other things down that I wouldn't be able to do without her. So we have a nice symbiotic, energetic relationship. Yeah.
If I find someone who has that many jobs, they almost always have an awesome wife.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah,
I could not do any of this shit without her. Absolutely.
That's a great thing, man. Have a great team like that, because when I look at all the things you do, I'm like restaurants, wines. Now you're making mead, and then
that's from I'm going to Michigan now to like meet with a couple winemakers there, because I'm gonna probably put a facility there, because my dad's house is there, so I'm gonna go. That's where I'm going, to my dad's house.
Well, they're trying to kill Michigan, so it's a good place to go right now. They're literally the governor's making everything fall apart.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna find out. So
you can get a land for like $1.
I'm gonna fix it.
Do whatever you need to do.
So we're gonna go. I'm gonna make mead, cider, and possibly wine in Michigan. So
I just had a friend came back from Michigan. He's telling me horror stories.
Not where I live. You look out my porch, and there's like 16 acres of trees. Deer walking through your yard. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know either. I'm just repeating what other people tell me. It's fun to do.
Yeah.
You can pretend you know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So what part of Michigan?
Up right on Lake Michigan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Mason County.
Oh, so that's pretty rural, right?
Yeah.
Why did you choose that area?
That's where my dad was a teacher. So I went when I left Ohio, I went to live with my dad in Michigan, and that's where he was, wrestling coach and teacher in Western Michigan. So he built a house. He and Nick Tatarchik, this big motherfucker, he and his sons and my dad built the house that I own now in Scottville.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's why I'm going back to check in on the house, look at these buildings that we've been looking at, set up a situation. That's why I have my friend Tim White's with me in the car, my winemaking partner. So we're just exploring a building. We're going to talk to some growers. There's definitely cider there. I mean, there's apples everywhere, and I can make mead tomorrow, because you can get honey.
What keeps you motivated to constantly do these new projects, another project like this?
Puzzles. I just fucking love puzzles. Physical, large-scale, sculptural, and big space puzzles.
So you think of almost like constructing a new business or a warehouse or a factory like this, or a creation of like an art piece.
Yeah, that, and also watching what we just went through with this lockdown. I have 3 greenhouses, so we were able to feed a bunch of people in our 100 family, extended family with the businesses and everything. We were able to provide a little bit of food, not as much as they would need, but we certainly saved them at least 1 or 2 trips to the grocery store by providing them pasta, some of the fresh vegetables, a roll of toilet paper, some soap, that kind of shit that they just couldn't get at the store. We had to go through commercial channels to get some of these materials to get.
That's a severely underrated pleasure too, to be able to provide for people.
Yeah, I mean, we were able to do that for over 100 families, in our little circle. I want to build more of that. I want to do more of that. So
that's awesome.
I think in a little town there's all these little towns all over the United States that dried up because they put the bypass in and put the Walmart and the Home Depot out away from the little town. Beautiful structures, solid buildings that just dried up. So now you're seeing a resurgence of these little towns turning around from what they were to being these little thriving things. And the kind of cornerstone of that stuff is, food, lodging, restaurant, brewery or winery, distillery. There's that little concentration of things.